Okay, so hello and welcome back to the Joanne Rowgan experience. Today for today's episode, actually, we have Plato's theories and concepts of law. Now, today's episode is going to go a little bit differently because we're going to be accepting calls from you guys about questions about, Plato and surrounding his theories. So let's get this started. Jade, what is our first question?
We actually got our first question here from Ken Smith. He's asking, why did we select this philosopher or philosophy?
Well, I don't know about you, Jade, but I just kept hearing about Plato from my philosophy class and other classes, and he seems like a pretty significant guy. Like, his name just keeps popping up.
Yeah.
And I know, next to nothing about him, so I felt so obligated to learn more, you know? He seems like he's so well-known, and it seems like it'd be good if I knew some more about him.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you, actually. I learned about Plato in my history class last year, I'm pretty sure. And since he's pretty well known, one of his work actually piqued my interest. Plato described natural law as the biggest region of being, meaning that the form of the good is the cause of all things, and this will lead a person to act wisely. And our next caller here is Kenneth Barak. He's asking to explain their philosophy of justice and their law and use as a sample of their work as a perfect example of their philosophy and proof of the explanation.
So I actually have a quote here from Plato's book, The Republic, which basically is a Socratic dialogue about justice, order, character of a state, and what makes a just man. And this is all relevant to the quote. I'm not just dropping knowledge to flex. So the quote states, if a ruler can create just laws, and if the warrior can carry out the orders of the rulers, and if the producers can obey this authority, then the society will be just. This quote shows how Plato's definition of justice, essentially natural law, is when a state at all levels of government is whether that can be individual or societal work together in unison for the benefit of the state. Okay, so now we have our next caller, Jane Doe, and her question is, use the current issue in class, or maybe this one is Miss Savita's, used in class and summarize the issue in your reflection.
Angeli, do you remember one of the cases we did in class? I think it was called the spanking case.
Oh yeah, that case. I remember it had something to do with the criminal code being broken or something.
Yeah, the CFCYL went to court actually stating that the legalized corporal punishment on children for discipline was invalid due to section 43 of the criminal code. This case involved CFCYL.
Oh, what does the CFCYL stand for?
It stands for Canadian Foundation of Children, Youth and Law, but basically they went to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice and to the Court of Appeal for Ontario. And do you remember how they put them in the lower court and they later on dismissed the case?
Oh yeah, I remember that happened. I didn't see didn't the SCC rule section 43 was constitutional?
Yeah, they did, because the Constitution is a part of the Charter Rights and Freedoms. And the case also included 3 distinct branches of the criminal law, as well as the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child.
Wow, I can't believe that. So that's a pretty significant case, So our next caller is Phyllis Ferb, and she wants to know, how would Plato and his theory address or respond to this issue? And she wants you to explain.
Okay, explain. Let's see. I believe that Plato would most definitely disagree with the parents spanking their children under the age of 18 to strictly limited force, because it doesn't give the children the respect and equality that they need. Plato's view on natural law is that the base of the universe or nature are the form of good, and with this, it'll basically make a person choose wise decisions. So meaning, like...
Plato wouldn't spank his kids.
Exactly.
What would Plato do to his kids? Would he spank them?
No.
You just, have a stern talk, constant timeouts,
Yeah.
and that's what he would do.
Like, discipline them in a way that you're not hurting them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's our next question?
Our next question is from Ken's Mayweather. Can this philosophy work today? Explain why or why not.
Well, honestly, natural law is thought to be like the foundation of many laws today. And it's a part of our legal systems whether we choose it to be or not to be. And this is shown through criminal trial with the notion of innocent until proven guilty, which shows how we use natural law theory, inheritance of good and evil, when deciding a case of the defendant. Okay, so our next caller is actually Peter Parker, and he wants to know, or he wants us to explain the historical and philosophical origins of law and their connection and relevance to contemporary society. Do you have this answer for us, Jade?
Yeah. Angeli, did you know that the person who created the natural law theory was discovered by St. Thomas Aquinas? He maintained and propounded an influential systematization. Natural law was also defined by Aristotle and Plato, but Plato didn't really have a theory on natural law. Although some of his theories do correlate and have concepts of natural law, until this day natural law is being used. However, as human beings weren't taught how to use it, but we discovered it along the way by typically making choices for good and evil. Now, our next caller here is Cherry Chunky. She's asking, trace the development of law from its primary sources in religion, customs, and social and political philosophy.
Okay, so just before I get into this, let it be noted that natural law derives on the basis that the rules laid down by nature or God. So, with that said, natural law originated from Greece and obtained its most vital formulation in Societism. Sometime later, Aristotle came around with his theories on natural law and he was honestly said to be the father of natural law. Later, the church Christianized the Roman ideas. Then came along Christian Thomas Aquinas, who interpreted Aristotle's work.
Oh, and just to add to that, the primary source of natural law is that it's based on a close observation of human nature or values essentially to human nature. Thomas Aquinas' version of natural law is that the light of reason is placed by nature and or by God in every man to guide him in his acts. That being the case, human beings among God's creatures is used as a reason to lead their lives.
So our next question is from Swirl Caramel, and her question is to evaluate the different concepts and principles of philosophy and theories of law. So Aristotle said, just be law should not be mistaken for just by nature. Aristotle also believed that natural justice is positive and which exists by people's opinions. And not by people's opinions, externally from people's opinions. And St. Thomas Aquinas thought as though natural law and religion were intertwined. Aquinas believed that external law in which created all and has a natural order, and that natural law is the way we as humans can actively participate in the external law. C.S. Lewis, a British writer, says, according to the religious view, what is behind the universe is more like a mind than anything else we know. It is conscious and has a purpose and prefers one thing to another. There's a something in which is directing me in the universe, and it appears to me as a law that is urging me to do right. Our next caller is Northwest, and she wants us to explain legal concepts such as democracy, justice, equity, equality, rule of law, sovereignty, and primacy of the right. So pretty much, essentially what democracy breaks down to is the people govern themselves. A fun fact about Plato is that he was actually against democracy. Now keep in mind, Plato was exposed to Athenian democracy, which means Athenian citizens participated in direct democracy, in which citizens have the power to decide policies, like while politicians were responsible for like implementing said policies type of situation. Plato also concluded that democracy was corrupt and unjust. And Athenian democracy was like the first so that just says a lot. Sovereignty is basically just when a country has authority over the land and people. So Canada has sovereignty over Canada and Canadian citizens. Now, before we move on to it's really important to ask yourself if you're more of a equity or equality person. I think Plato was more of an equity person. And here's the difference. Equality is giving everyone the same resources, while equity is more like realizing people need to allocate resources to reach an equal outcome. Now, rule of law is basically like the mother law that keeps the rest in check. The rule of law is a principle in which all people and entities are accountable for public laws, regardless of their occupation, race, gender, etc. And primacy of the right allows people the right of dignity, which allows people to choose, and be treated fairly, and let's say, have dignity from their employees or employers, and, that type of thing. Our next caller is Joseph Killa, and he wants us to analyze the views of historical and contemporary philosophers of law. So there's actually a couple of philosophers that ultimately led to Plato's views on philosophical laws. Cephalus, Polemarchus, Theomarchus, and Rowgan. Okay, so maybe the names aren't correct, or the names are correct, but my pronunciation of them isn't the best. But you guys know who I'm talking about. They all aided Plato's theory in what ultimately he knew what was unjust. From these philosophers and their theories of justice, Plato was able to create his own theories of justice, which is still prominent in our justice system today. Cephalus thought justice was speaking the truth and paying one's debt, while Polemarchus continued this theory but added justice seems to consist of in giving what is proper to him. Plato, however, was like, no, this is wrong, and the reason why is because, and I quote, this formula may involve the violation of spirit of right, and his formula does not admit of being taken as a sound of universal principle. Now, because I didn't understand that when I first read it, and I know you didn't either, basically Plato is saying that if you, let's say, you owe Jade weapons, but then she goes crazy, which is very likely, is it just to return the deadly weapons to her? Well, Plato's next point was that it's easy to be nice to a friend and mean to an enemy. But what happens if a friend is actually a secret enemy? Are you supposed to treat them like a friend or an enemy? Jade, what would you do?
I would treat them as a new enemy, because they've never really treated me as a friend in the first place. They've always treated me as an enemy. So why after finding out that they're my enemy, would I still treat them as my friend?
That's not what Plato would do. Plato thought that it would go against the very conception of morality. Plato had more of a virtue-based conception of ethics, basically meaning to maintain happiness, you must be virtuous, essentially maintaining high morals and values. After debunking Polemarchus, Plato moves on to Thrasymachus' theory of justice, which is a bit more critical and seems to make the least sense to me. But with that said, I quote, the interest of the stronger. So in other words, the idea of war, the strongest country wins. Now, it was originally Socrates who attacks Theomarchus' theory, saying that justice includes a higher level of intellect. Plato, Socrates' student, agreed and carried on his theories. Moving on to Rowgan, had a theory that was known as the social contract theory. Rowgan believed that we are only moral because we have to be, and if we weren't getting paid, we would see more injustice. He uses the argument that in the primitive times of society, the strongest enjoyed life while the weaker suffered, injustice causing justice to be artificial and unnatural. Plato realizes that all of these theories have one thing in common, and that justice was thought of as an external concept, an accomplishment, an importation, or a convention. They have none of them carried it in their soul or considered it a place of habitation. Plato came to the conclusion that justice is internal in the soul. So Plato has a question, and it's to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of Plato. And Jade, I'm sure you can agree with me here. After researching Plato's theories related to the universal laws, I found that one of Plato's strengths is his definition of laws, thus creating the same law for everyone and causing unity. But on the other hand, I found that not everyone shares his values, and some of the states don't function properly without some interference. So I guess that would have to be a weakness of his.
Our next caller is from Marina Saucer. She wants to know what the different theories of laws are. What I've got down so far is natural law is basically universal. It'll apply to anyone, anywhere, and anytime. It's a system of righteousness and justice derived from nature rather than from the rules of society and or positive law. On the other hand, positive law is a man-made law set by political superiors to act in pursuit of legal rights. Now, Plato believes that the essence of nature are its forms, the form of the good, which Plato describes as the brightest region of being. It'll cost a whole lot of things. Once it's been seen, it'll lead a person to act wisely. While in positive law, James Bernard Murphy argues that some of these thinkers state successive chapters in a single fascinating story which revolves around a fundamental ambiguity because of its deliberate imposition. Murphy demonstrates how the discourse of positive law incorporates both the normative and the descriptive dimensions of law.
Okay, so our next question is from Fade Beniceto, and he wants us to explain the concept of justice defined by philosophers and legal scholars. So the philosophical definition of justice, according to the Encyclopedia of Britannica, is the concept of proper proportion between a person's deserts, what is merit, and the good and bad things that befall or are allotted to him or her. To Plato, justice is a part of human virtue, a bond which joins man together in society. Justice is a part of the soul, which installs order and duty similar to health in the body. To Aristotle, justice is lawful and fair, with equitable distributions of fairness and proper correction for what is inequitable. Both Aristotle and Plato thought of justice as the goodness and as well as the willingness to obey laws.
And that concludes the Joanne Rowgan Experience episode, Plato's Theories and Concepts of Law. Thank you for listening and have a great day.